All right, folks, we're back. So, to recap, basically, I've got the truck up on the ramps here to give us a little extra room underneath. So, changing oil is really one of the things that, the do-it-yourself or DIY person can still do on their own without too many special tools. Really, a few things I recommend to have. Number one is, have a good oil filter wrench that fits the oil filter that you're using. Just need a wrench or a socket to get onto the oil drain plug. Another thing too you're going to need is probably a really good flashlight. Okay, having good light underneath the car is important. A lot of times you can catch things with good lighting. Okay, I have a really long hood light up here that I use, but that doesn't work very well underneath. So make sure you got a good flashlight. Okay, so some other things you're going to need. Obviously, a good oil drain bucket. Okay, another thing you're going to need is probably a good creeper, especially if you're working on the ground. Okay, and creepers, one of the number one rules with them is when you're using a creeper, make sure that if you're not in use, make sure that it is leaning up against something and not on the floor. Okay, if the creeper is on the floor, okay, these make for great skateboards. Someone can step on one and zoom, away you go. So make sure you get your drain positioned in the proper spot. This one's also got a nice magnetic base on it. So you can put it just about anywhere that's metal and it won't be in the way. Okay. Okay, so the drain plug on this one is actually right in the front of the oil pan, which is kind of handy. It drains right in between the front axle here and the exhaust. So these drain plugs, break them loose. Okay, that one came loose pretty easy. And you want to fit your oil drain and make sure that the breather is unplugged so that it doesn't overflow. Okay? Now, this is where things can get messy. And if you don't want to get your hands messed up, which I don't either, put on the... Get our gloves on. And we're going to uncork this thing. And hopefully in the least messy fashion. Okay? So I'm going to do the quick move here. Okay. And I got pretty good aim today. So one of the first things you should look at is make sure that the drain plug gasket is in good shape, if it has one, and make sure that it's not stuck to the oil pan. Okay, if it is stuck to the oil pan, just make sure it's there when you go to put the drain plug back in. Okay? So one of the biggest things I see new technicians doing is they just sit here and wait while the oil's draining. You got other things to do, so trust me, keep moving. Okay? So what else can we do? While we're under here, we can be shaking down front end parts, okay, making sure we don't have any steering issues down here. Making sure your tie rods are in good shape. Folks, this thing has 250,000 miles on it. Chances are it's got something wrong with it. You just have to find it. Okay? So trust me. Alright, so that thing's just about done draining. But what I plan on doing here is also taking loose the oil filter as well. Okay, while we're underneath here. Now, if you feel like putting the drain plug back in first and doing that first and then going for the oil filter, be my guest. Just because I'm doing things a certain way doesn't mean that you have to do it that exact way. Okay? Find a flow that works for you. Okay? This is not about what, this is not Ryan's way or the highway, so to speak. Okay? So next up, we're going to grab our filter wrench and we're going to unscrew the oil filter. And I'm going to try and get a better vantage point for you folks here. Okay, the oil filter's in a really kind of weird spot on this thing, so I'll try to get a good lighting on it. Okay, so the oil filter is right up here, and the other thing, the first thing as well, you want to make sure you're turning it the right way. Okay, so I'm going to try and sneak this thing up in there. Okay, and we're just going to unspin it just a little tiny bit, because more than likely some oil is going to come dripping out of it, which it is right now. Okay, now you notice oil's dripping on the exhaust right now, and that's not a great thing, but it's okay. The way this is positioned, it's almost impossible for that not to happen. Okay. The main thing is you want to make sure you clean this up before you give this car back to the customer. Okay, because if you don't, what's going to happen is this is going to smoke and stink after they get the car back. So trust me, make sure that you get this cleaned up before you go down the road, or before you give the car back to the customer. Okay, so it looks like it's just about done draining. Let's get a little bit more in there. Okay, and I prefer to let this thing drool for a little bit. You know, if you're under the gun, sometimes you just got to spin them off and make a mess. Sometimes this job, doing oil changes, is a messy job, and there's really nothing you can do about it. So let's just spin this thing off of there, and we'll just deal with it. So basically, the first thing you need to check and make sure of is make sure that seal is still on the oil filter that you take off. Okay? Why is that? Can you think of any reasons why? If you said because you don't want to double gasket an oil filter. Okay, so here's the new one. Okay, now other than color, you might notice there's quite a bit of difference here. And this is the difference between buying quality parts and the cheapest thing imaginable. Okay, so this filter, the old one, is about, I don't know, about a third the size of the one I'm putting back on it. Okay, this is the proper size of the filter. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how in the heck did they get away with that? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Everything on the front base of it is exactly the same. So if you can see that, this thing is almost identical in the middle. There's just more material on the outside edge. Okay, so what a lot of people do is when they're down there doing the oil change, they'll take the two filters and put them together on the seals, and that pre-lubes the gasket. Oops, got a little too much on there. Okay, so I'm going to clean that off a little bit because I don't want to slop that all over the place. Okay, but what that does is that gives you a couple things right away. Okay, that also is a visual indicator that the old seal came off with the old filter. Okay, because the last thing you want to do is double gasket one of these oil filters. Because why? Because you'll have a trail of oil leading out of the shop all the way into the parking lot. And let me tell you, from someone who's done that, you know, once or twice, it's very embarrassing. Okay, especially when your boss or your service advisor has to make you aware of it. And these are the types of things that we should be paying attention to, you know, while we're doing this kind of work. It's an oil change, you know. Yes, it's easy work, but it is also easy to mess up. Trust me. Okay, so we're just gonna kind of redo that one more time. Okay, and you don't need a bunch of oil on there, just enough to coat the gasket. Okay, that's all we're looking for. And everyone always freaks out, oh, you're putting old oil on the gasket. It doesn't matter. Okay, but what also I try to do, I'm going to put that drain plug back in for just a second. Make sure that it's not drilling on me. Okay. is what I try to do is I also try to wipe off the base where the oil filter sits first, to make sure that no garbage from the engine has fallen down onto the sealing surface. And once again, that is another time that you can check and make sure that you haven't left the old gasket on there. Trust me, it's easy to do, folks. Okay, so I'm putting the new one up in there. Okay. My general rule of thumb with most filters is screw them on by hand until they stop. Okay, so, and like I said, you're going to screw it on there until it stops. Okay, so it won't go any further. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go an extra 3/4 to 1 turn. Okay, so I can see the little mark that's on that thing, so I'm going to turn this thing around 1 full turn until I see that mark again. Okay, if you can't quite get it there, it's probably okay. But guess what? That was almost 1 turn exactly right there. Okay, so that filter is plenty tight, trust me. It will not come off, and we shouldn't have any problems with that. Now we need to make sure we clean this before you put this thing back on the road. Now this thing is definitely not clean yet. If you notice, that exhaust is still covered in oil. So really one of the only things that can clean that off. Okay, we're going to spray this down. Get it all on the exhaust. Okay, to get all the old oil off of it so this thing doesn't smoke like crazy when you get it back on the road. Okay, was sometimes I recommend that the engine is warmed up. Make sure the engines are warmed up when you go to do a service on them like this, because a lot of times if they're not, the oil drains really slow, and it can impede, it'll take too much time for it to drain out and that sort of thing. So make sure that the engine's got some heat in it, and make sure it's not 20 degrees out when you do this. Okay, so I think we've got plenty of it out. You can wait as long as you want, but I'm a flat rate technician by heart. I was for 13 years. I'll take as much time as I need to, but any more than that, we're good. Okay, so I'm going to tighten this drain plug back up. Now, there again, this is not something you need to crank down. Okay, just a good snug is all you need it. And if you ever seen Scotty Kilmer on his channel on YouTube, you'll probably get a chuckle out of this. But he all the time when he's torquing stuff down on his channel, he'll go he'll make a little grunt noise, and that's all he does. So anyway, we've got the new oil filter on. We've got the drain plug in it. All the oil's drained out of it. Let's go back up top.